is race day, and although it may not look like I am poised and ready to go to work, we've got a couple of hours, or an hour now, until we have to go, because it's a late start, of course, because it's a night race here, which means that I've got an hour to sit and soak up the sunshine. So, looking forward to what should be a really good race today. It is looking incredibly close between the top few cars. Ferrari definitely have the advantage at the moment, and Lewis and the Mercedes are struggling to keep their rear tyres alive. This is a rear limited track, which means that the struggles, if you like, in protecting tyres come at the rear. The struggles in terms of maintaining grip come at the rear of the car. Other circuits are more front limited, where it's your front tyres that you have to keep alive or have to maintain the grip levels. And Mercedes are really struggling, particularly on the softer end of the range. The super soft tyres, they just cannot keep them alive without overheating them. And that, Lewis qualified on the soft tyre for that very reason, knowing he had a grid penalty, 5 places grid penalty of course for a gearbox change. He's qualified on the soft tyre, which will put him onto an alternative strategy to the rest, because everybody else qualified on the super soft and will start the race on the super soft. But I have to say that Lewis was much better on the soft tyre. That car seems to handle better and look after its tyres better on the soft rather than the super soft. However, at some point in the race, he's going to have to make a change and go on to the softer tyre, and I think he's going to struggle with that. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, but at the moment it's definitely advantage Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen.
So that was a race, wasn't it? I really enjoyed that. I had a great start with all sorts happening in the opening laps. Bit of a dull section, I suppose, or a slightly less interesting section in the middle, but then a spectacular finish where we just weren't quite sure if Valtteri Bottas might be able to put that move on Vettel towards the end. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It had all of those different things, drama in all sorts of areas. This was a race that was a battle not only of the key drivers on track, but of the teams involved. A huge battle where each team at Ferrari and Mercedes in particular, if we're talking about the front few, were kind of camped out in their own garages, their own war rooms, desperately trying to outthink each other, to outsmart each other and outplay each other through strategy, trying to draw the opposition into their game, and by changing strategies and by switching things up, which Mercedes obviously had to do. They originally went for the one stop with Lewis Hamilton because of his 5-place penalty and the fact that he was able to start the race on the soft tyre as opposed to the super soft tyre after qualifying on it on Saturday. They started on a one stop originally. That was their plan A. Valtteri Bottas was originally going for a 2-stop but switched to a 1-stop. Ferrari had no choice at that point but to react to that with Sebastian Vettel, and Sebastian was always going for a 2-stop race today, and that meant when he got on to his second set of tyres, he was racing and pushing at a level which would have got his tyres and taken the most out of his tyres for that stint that he was expecting to do. Halfway through that stint, they realised that they had a serious threat from Mercedes behind, and they then had to switch Sebastian Vettel onto a one-stop race as well. So Sebastian actually did an incredibly good job to keep those tyres alive for that extremely long stint that it ended up being, particularly given how much he'd taken out of them in the early part of that stint. Absolutely brilliant drive from Sebastian today. Adapted incredibly well to the conditions, to the situation that was changing all around him at the time. I thought Valtteri also drove a good race. I think I would have liked to have seen him be more aggressive at the end. I always wonder whether, if it had been somebody like a Lewis Hamilton, if it had been a Max Verstappen closing in on Sebastian Vettel at the end there, whether we would have seen a more aggressive move put on Sebastian right at the end. But look, Valtteri did a good job, and second place was a decent finish for him today. Decent recovery after the pretty awful weekend he had in Australia. It will have boosted his confidence brilliantly, which is exactly what he needs. I've got to say something about that Ferrari pit stop. I know I did that video yesterday talking about Ferrari having potential pit stop problems. I don't have a crystal ball. I just saw that there were some issues over the weekend. I know that the issues that the Haas team had back in Australia were at least in part due to the axle and the hubs and the wheel nuts and everything that they buy from Ferrari, so I know they have the same kit. What happened today in that Ferrari pit stop, and I'm going to look at this I think in more detail in a video maybe tomorrow or Tuesday, it wasn't the same problem that Haas had. It was the guy taking the wheel off, couldn't get the wheel off or the wheel nut off on the left rear of the car. And I wonder if what happened was, in him flustering and trying to get the gun working to get the nut off the car, he maybe hit the button on the handle of his gun which signals to the rear jacks and to the light system to say that the job was done. Maybe that got triggered by mistake. I don't know, I'm speculating at this stage. I will find out what I can and try and do a more in-depth video. But if that was what happened, him triggering that button would have illuminated the light on the rear jack. When the other side of the car was done, both green lights would have come on the jack. The jack would have dropped on the floor. It would have given the signal to the green traffic light at the front of the car when all four corners were done. If he'd hit that button, it would think that corner was done and the green light would change. The man who is at the front, the old lollipop man, if you like, who can override that system, wouldn't have been able to react, wouldn't have necessarily seen that there was a problem going on at the rear because he would have got the green light to say that that corner was done. And before you know it, the car is gone. And it was an awful situation. I really hope that there's a full recovery from Francesco, the mechanic at Ferrari there. It was a horrible situation. When you see it back in sort of slow motion, you can see it's a pretty serious injury for him. So we obviously wish him the absolute best. But unfortunately, that ruined Kimi's race, obviously. But it also kind of forced Ferrari's hand a little bit in that, and certainly would have helped to make that decision to switch him onto the one-stop race. I think it was the right decision, and obviously ultimately proved to be anyway. But when all of a sudden one of your key members of that pit crew is out of action, and you've had a problem with the kit in a pit stop on Kimi's car, do you want to risk Sebastian Vettel having to go through a pit stop using that same setup? So I think that would have absolutely helped make that decision to put him onto the one stop and keep him out for the rest of the race. But ultimately, they won it. So it proved to be the right decision. This championship is absolutely on. And for those, and this includes me to some extent, I thought this would be a dominant display from Mercedes, not necessarily at this particular race, but over the early part of the season. And actually, it's not proving that way, is it? This is much closer than we thought, which is great. Certain tracks are going to suit Mercedes, certain tracks are going to suit Ferrari. Certainly this one was a Ferrari track. Absolutely not a Mercedes track here. They struggled to keep their rear tyres alive. Even Valtteri said to us at the end of the race that he struggled to keep his rear tyres from overheating in that long stint towards the end, and that was ultimately one of the reasons he wasn't able to get past Sebastian. So the championship's going to go on, and I think this is great. We've got a real battle on our hands. And also, I must just quickly say, we had some incredible battles outside of the top couple of cars today. Pierre Gasly, what a drive from him. What a drive this weekend from him. Great result for him, 4th place today. Equals Toro Rosso's best ever finish. It gives Honda their best ever finish in this turbo era. It's a real boost for everybody at Honda after the dismal few years they've had, with McLaren and even in Australia they had problems. So a real shot in the arm for everybody there. So congratulations, Kevin Magnussen. Great result for him in 5th as well. And that's not a freak result. I know that that Kimi dropped out, I know that there were problems ahead, but you know what? That's about the pace of this Haas car. They were running 5th in Melbourne before the pit stop problems. That's about where they are, which is brilliant. They are up there in the mix, right at the sharp end, and that's nice to see for that team that have struggled for so long. The McLarens, both McLarens in the top 10, also a good day for the team. Overshadowed slightly by the fact that the Toro Rosso Honda of Gasly was well in front of them, but remove that part of it, and actually that's a good day for McLaren. 2-point scoring finishes with both cars has to go down as a big plus for them. So a good day there from the guys at Woking as well. Right, I mean, that's it. I've rambled on for way too long. I would love to know what you think of today, what you thought of today's race. You know, all of the different aspects of it. What do you think of the result? What do you think of the fact this was a hugely strategic race? You know, some people I know don't like that. Some people don't like the fact that the teams are controlling the driver's pace at different times by telling him to drive to a target lap time. And I understand that. We want to see drivers racing. But I also love the strategy side of Grand Prix in this modern era. It's complex, but it's fascinating, it's interesting. It's a real game of chess going on in the back rooms, in the war rooms at these teams, just as much as the guys out on track that are desperately clinging onto the steering wheels. I absolutely love it. I'm buzzing after today. I thought it was really, really good. So please let me know what you think, and I will get into more depth about the Ferrari pit stop issue in a video over the coming days. But for now, I want to know what you thought of today's race. Driver of the day, perhaps. Let me know who you think. See you tomorrow.